Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go back so we can have this on the recording. We're dealing with Smyrna. I won't say everything that I said. But we're dealing with Smyrna, and I'll start with chapter 2, verse 9. I know your works and your suffering and poverty, but you are rich, meaning spiritually. And I know the blasphemy, those who are constantly cursing you and saying all derivative things about you that are not healthy or good. And they call themselves and are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Now, the reason why it says synagogue of Satan, it means because of their constantly persecuting another Jewish sect. And that Jewish sect happened to be the church in Smyrna. And so that's why it says, that's why I could call them a synagogue of Satan and not the small gathering in Smyrna of these people who accepted Yeshua, what we say is Jesus, as Messiah, as the anointed one. And so that's why they were called synagogue of Satan. Mean they were constantly making negative remarks and putting them down and persecuting them, as we're going to read in the next verse. So then he says, do not fear a thing. Really, that's what it says in the Aramaic. Even though I'm reading it here in Dr. Lambs's translation, I remember what it says in the Aramaic. He says, do not be afraid of a thing that you might suffer. Look. Now, this word in verse 10, the word devil, let's look at it from Aramaic, which is going to be a little different here. Dr. Lambda translates it as devil, which is okay to translate it like that, but it's not the full meaning. If you're reading it in Aramaic, it has a specific word. Now, the word for devil or demons that's used in the Gospels is dewane. Dewana means one devil, one demon. Demon comes from Greek, and originally demon had a different meaning than it means today. And people don't even know the Greek, what happened to the Greek word demon. Demon is what we call it. Okay. For none of these, don't feel anything that you might suffer, even though it says shall suffer, but might suffer. That's what I would use in the Aramaic, using that particular verb. And he says, look, now here's the word that's there in Aramaic. The word that's there is pronounced akel karza. Akel karza. Akel karza is the same word that was used when Jesus went into the desert to meditate and to fast and to commune with God. He did those three things: fasting, meditating, and it's during the meditation that he got what we call the three temptations, the things that he was going over in his mind. And it says, and the devil, the word devil there, it's the same word, akel karza. And this word means something that constantly gnaws at you, that won't let you go, that is constantly after you, just won't let you go. You ever have a nagging thought that was just so negative, it was eating you up alive? Well, that's what they call in Aramaic, akel karza. Akel karza. That's how you say that in Aramaic. And you can say, well, you say, we've been saying, oh, something is deviling me. Don't we say that in English? Something is deviling me means absolutely driving me crazy. This thought won't stop. This negative thing won't stop, won't leave me alone. It's just deviling me. You see, we use that in English too. So this, which means here that a particular group of Jewish men were, he said, we'll cast some of you into prison. Now he's talking to the assembly, not just to the messenger. And he says, some of you will be cast into prison. In other words, they'll get you arrested. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. The Apostle Paul, whose original name was Saul, that was his original name. When he accepted Jesus' teachings, he changed it to Paul. So, but his original name was Saul. He was named after the great king of Israel, the first king that was anointed as the official monarch of the 12 tribes of Israel. So he was named after that, Saul. But when he accepted Jesus' teaching, he changed his name to Paul. Was after a famous, a great famous general who was a conqueror. So this is why he changed it too, because he changed to different ideas now and was no longer unjust under the laws of Moses. He was under the laws of the Mashiach, the anointed. So he changed it. But before he did, he was persecuting all the Christians. In fact, it was on his way to Damascus, even leaving Israel and Jerusalem in that area, and he was going north into Syria and into Damascus to get a hold of those Jewish people who were accepting Yeshua, Jesus, as the anointed one, and throwing them in prison. And he would be called in Aramaic Akel Karza, because he was not only going to do that in Damascus, but he was doing it in Jerusalem. He was doing it in other places in Syria. He was going after the Jewish community and those who were accepting the Jesus teachings. So this is what it means here when it says devil. It doesn't mean some supernatural being somewhere that's chasing you, they're going to put you in prison. And people read it too literally. They don't understand that this is Eastern Aramaic. And that's why I'm glad I can read the Aramaic, because of understanding the word there and what it is. So now you have that. If you have your Bible, you should make a mark on that to show it doesn't mean a supernatural creature. It means a group of men from the synagogue, who were Jewish, of course, by their faith, was going to make sure some of the people got arrested for what they were doing. And they did. They did do that. And you will be tested. The word tried there means tested, because of being hauled off to prison. And you will be oppressed, oppressed for 10 days. And people try to make a prophecy out of this. Oh, there'll only be 10 days is an Aramaic way of speaking, which means a short duration of time. When they use numbers, they don't mean it literally. And people trying to use prophecy takes every one of those numbers literally. And it shouldn't be taken literally. For 10 days means longer than 3 days. It's not very, very short, but it'll be a short duration. So don't take the 10 days literally. That's what it means there. And be faithful even to death, and I will give you a crown of life. In other words, what he's saying here, if even some of you should during that time lose your life, don't worry, you'll find the crown of life. You're physically die, but you're going to find life. You're going to see life. You're going to know life. You're going to know a whole different life. That's what it means. A crown of life it means you're victorious. Don't worry about it if you may have to face death. So then he says, he who has ears, or anyone who has ears, I can translate it either way. Anyone who has ears, may he hear. In other words, may it get through to you, or let him hear, which means, pay attention. I can also translate it, may he hear. He who has ears, may he hear. Anyone who has ears, may he hear what the Spirit says to the gatherings, to all 7 of the gatherings that are going to get this message. This is for all of you, not just the messenger, not just the one group, but to all the groups. He says, and what should they hear? He who or anyone, I like anyone rather than he who. And not just because it's masculine form there, because I can translate it that way. I can translate whosoever. I can also translate it as whosoever. Whosoever is conquering. That's exactly how I would translate it. Anyone who is conquering or whosoever is conquering in all these assemblies, are conquering what? Conquering all these lies that are coming, conquering all the persecution that is coming, all these things that are hurting them. He says, and that's why he used that word akel karza, that is hurting you, that is nagging you, that is driving you. He said, he who is overcoming all of that, anyone, whoever is overcoming or conquering, the word there really means to conquer, who is conquering will not be damaged. That word means hurt, damaged by the second death. What in the world is the second death? Okay, most of us are familiar with what we call death. We don't think of two deaths, a second death. We only think of one death. That's why it says second death, because you can be hurt by the second death. In other words, the first death takes the body. The second, and it says hurt, damaged. In other words, hurt. Jesus used this very expression, only he did not say second death. He says, don't be afraid of those who destroy the body. In other words, bring you to death, who destroy the body, bring you to death. But of those who are able to throw body and soul into hell fire. In other words, that put your mind, your soul, yourself, that, in other words, what will hurt? The word kill can also mean strike, damage, hurt. So watch those with their false philosophies, is what Jesus was saying. Don't be afraid of those in a war and stuff like that, that take your body, that defer what we call the first death. This is Eastern way of talking. The second death is, and that's why Jesus was saying, be aware of those that damage your soul. That the word soul there is nausea. Your nausea means yourself, your core, your mind, your being, your essence. This is what it's talking about. Your being, your essence. That's the word that's used. Your nephesh in Hebrew, nausea in Aramaic, that disturb the inner life. And it puts you in hell, meaning with their false philosophies, with their ways of life, it puts your mind in torment, which hurts you physically, mentally, emotionally, in your cells, everywhere, hurts you. That's what Jesus was talking about. He said, the physical death is not the real thing. And so this is what he's saying. He that is overcoming all this persecution, then what happens? You won't be hurt by the second death, damaged. You won't be hurt by that second death. I hope you all understand that. The inner sense of yourself. And there's so many teachings today. I know people that are supposed to be Christians and they're full of fear, full of the fear of the devil, fear of what people may say, fear of false this, fear. They have a damaged soul. They're tasting the second death. They're tasting that second death and don't know it. They live in fear. I'll never forget one time when I used the word in the university in Arizona, and I was talking about the 7 keys that unlock scripture. And And I mentioned all the keys, and one of the keys happens to be mysticism. That's another way of saying a spiritual understanding rather than just a physical one. And so this person got up and ran out of the meeting and went to a person that I had spoken at a TV show, and they were getting ready to show it all over California and all over Arizona. And she went to them and said, that man believes in mysticism. Because you see, mysticism to her was a fearful, evil thing. And yet I can tell you all through the whole history of Christianity, you see these people, they're full of fear. Their soul is hurt. Their mind is hurt. Their emotions are hurt. And they're full of fear. And she ran out and they canceled all those TV shows I did with that person in Phoenix, in Arizona. And she hurt then all the other people who, and I talked nothing about but about Jesus. Didn't get into anything controversial, but I explained a lot of the Eastern things, and they loved it. The people that were there when it was being filmed loved it. It got canceled because of that fear in that Christian woman. And I said, I'm doing this meaning, quote, Christian, who's full of fear because she has certain beliefs that ministers have planted in her own heart and soul that is eating and damaging her soul. And she's tasting of a second death. And how about people who do die and they're full of all this negative? It has to be cleansed, And because they were damaged by the second death. And this is what he's talking about. All the persecution that they're receiving there in Smyrna, don't worry. If you're overcoming, if you're conquering, you won't be hurt by any philosophy or idea because you're overcoming it. You're conquering it. And therefore, this applies to all the assemblies everywhere. And when this was written, then they used it to apply for all the assemblies, not just the 7 in Turkey, because it was Asia Minor. All right. So now we go to the 3rd assembly, and to the angel, messenger, Malacha, the Jewish leader of the assembly or gathering in Pergamos. Write this, write a letter. If it was an angel, why does an angel need a letter? So you know it's a live person, a Jewish follower of Jesus and a leader. And he says, and is leading them, and he says, these things says he who has a sharp, 2-edged sword. Now, where does that come from? It comes from the 1st chapter, because when it described the human being that he saw a sharp 2-edged sword coming out of his mouth, which means truth, which cuts up and cuts down. It means something that's sharp. So you know there's going to be an operation here in this in this particular assembly. And he says, now he's speaking to the messenger. I know your works and where you dwell, even where Satan's, here we go again with the word Satan, even where Satan's seat is. Now, what does it mean by this? You have to understand Pergamos at that particular time in Asia Minor was a famous city. In fact, Augustus Caesar set up a strong governmental hold there in Pergamos, where they worshiped the emperor. Augustus Caesar did that and set it up in that particular city, Pergamos. And he set up the worship of the goddess Roma, R-O-M-A, Roma. She was set up there to be worshipped, as well as Diana, or Diana, as we say, as well as her. So the 2 goddesses were worshipped, as well as the emperor, the Roman emperor, as the Son of God. That's why it calls Satan's seat. Satan's seat means the authority of Satan. In other words, where he pontificates, where you hear all these teachings of how you need to worship the Roman goddess Roma and how you need to worship the goddess Diana and the emperor himself. So that's why it's called Satan's seat. I want you to understand what you're reading when you're reading the scriptures here. So this is what was done then. So then he goes on to say, I know the trouble you're in because you're right in the heart of Satan's seed. And you uphold my name. That means my teachings. To uphold Jesus' name, not that you believe in Jesus, but you hold to his teachings. That is what they're teaching there about the goddess Roma and about Diana is not true. It will damage you. So, and they do other things too, which we're going to get to in a minute. And he says, you uphold my name, my teachings, and you did not deny my faith, even in those days when the witness of mine appeared, that faithful one of mine, who was slain among you where Satan dwells. In other words, the Roman power and the god and the priesthood of the goddess Roma and Diana went after one particular. This person must have been very bold, probably went right to the temple itself. And I've been there, went right to the temple itself and pointed out that the goddess was not real and all that. And they slew him. And that the Christ, the anointed one, the true meaning of it, they didn't want to hear it and they killed that one. That's what it meant, faithful. Faithful means he was martyred. He was martyred, this person. Okay. But he says, I have a few things against you. Uh-oh. He's going after now the messenger. He's going after the messenger. And what is he going to say to the messenger? He says, because you have there, in other words, in your gathering, it must have been a pretty large one. In your gathering, you have those who hold to the teachings of Balaam, or we say Balaam in modern English, Balaam, but it's really Balaam is how you pronounce that in Aramaic. You have the teachings of Balaam, who took Balak, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the descendants of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit adultery. Okay, you have to know your Old Testament story to understand what he's talking about here. And that's in Numbers, the 25th chapter, verses 1 through 18. If you want to know the story, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. Balaam was a prophet, and Balak was the one who wanted all the people destroyed. He wanted the Israel who was crossing in the desert. He wanted them to all destroyed. And so what he asked them to do was set up idols along the path, different idols. And along with the idols, they had prostitutes. And when they would eat of that and worship of that idol, they would eat of the sacrifices and plus sleep with the harlots. That's why it says commit adultery. Because some men of Israel then went after that, and they saw all these women there, and they saw them then, and so they fell for it. And as a result of that, in other words, that kind of teaching was going on right there in that assembly, in that gathering. So he was telling them, and you also have among you sacrifice, and you also have among you who hold the teachings of the Nicolaitans, and I explained that to you last week. Turn away from it. That's what the word repent means. Turn to God. Repent means do an about face, turn away from these teachings and that are encouraging adultery and all these other type of teaching, free sex. And this is what he was talking about, because he says you're going to get into trouble. I'm going to get to that in a minute. He says, repent, or else I will come to you very soon. In other words, some of your members of your congregation, and you, because you're falling for it too, and I will fight against them with the sword of my mouth, with the truth that I just told you. That's what he's saying here. And again now, he who has ears, or anyone who hears, whosoever hears, may he hear what the Spirit says to these assemblies. Anyone who is conquering, I will give to him to eat of the hidden manna. Hidden manna really is what it is, manna. Hidden manna means hidden spiritual understanding. It's hidden from the masses, but you can get it if you follow these other philosophies and teachings. And the reason why it was dangerous, when he says, I will come very soon and will fight against them, which means with the truth, I will teach you the true philosophy. And if you're overcoming, then you will eat of hidden manna. Manna in Aramaic means, what is it? I will give you hidden, what is it? That's what manna means. Hidden, what is it? That is an Aramaic word. It's not English. Manna is not English. It's from the word, what is it? That's how you say, what is it? What is? Manna? Manna, oh, I can say, or manna, what? What is it? Hidden manna means special hidden food that brings spiritual enlightenment to your being, understanding, and you're not fooled by these other types of teachings and philosophies and from these other forms of religions that teach you all these other kinds of things. You're free of that. So then he says, and I will give him a white stone. Now, the white stone was used sometimes as seals, but they also used the white stones. They put it on the what we call tombstones, a white stone on prophets and holy men and special people. He says, I will give you and put a new name. You'll have a new name, not even the name you have now, which means you are going to become a new being. With the hidden manna, you'll have a new name and a new being, a new sense of your essence, a better understanding of your core of being. That's what it means when it says a new name. So we're doing right well. I wanted to get good. I wanted to do one more church before we go. He says, now, he says, which no man knows except him who receives it. Because you know what has been changing you. You know what enlightenment and understanding you have received that has put down the false philosophies and notions and ideas, and you have become free from the fear of death, free from the fear of what people say and do. And you find that unity, that love, that peace, that understanding in the midst of all the seed of hell, the seed of Satan, all of that. And you can go back over it when it talked about Smyrna and go all the way back to Ephesus. So we've done now Ephesus, Smyrna, and now we come to Pergamos, and now we deal with Thyatira. And to the messenger of the assembly of Thyatira, write, these things says the Son of God, the beloved, who has eyes like a flame of fire, means great conviction, and whose feet are like the fine brass from Lebanon, Remember, we read that in the first chapter, that burn in the furnace, which means this is strong brass, and it's hot, fiery, it's strong conviction. And when it gives you this imagery, that means what you're going to receive will give you the power to crush, to step on everything false. You don't run from it. You don't run from it. You just step on everything false. That's all. It won't overtake you. You'll overtake it. So he says, that's why it's the fine brass of Lebanon. You have to go back to chapter 1 for the full picture. I know your works. There it is again. I know you do good things. I know you do good things. And love and faith and service. I know all of that. And also your patience, speaking to the messenger. And your last works ought to be more abundant than even your first ones. You really are good. But notwithstanding, there's something here you are tolerating, and you need to correct it. He's talking to the messenger. To the messenger, you've got to correct what's going on in the assembly, in the gathering. He says, you're tolerating something. I have a few things against you because you allowed, that is tolerated, that woman, a prophetess, means a teacher who is not teaching truth. It was a woman teacher. To teach and to seduce my servants, meaning the people in the assembly, to commit promiscuity. That word fornication there means promiscuity, to go to harlots. But in modern language, it would be promiscuity, sexual promiscuity. And to eat things sacrificed to idols. Well, that goes along with it. When they eat those things sacrificed to idols, they also got the benefit of being with a harlot. And she was teaching this in the assembly. Yeah, don't be afraid of it. Go do it. Go do it. That's what this particular woman was doing. And he says, I gave her time to repent, that is, to stop teaching these things and to turn to me and learn the truth. But she did not turn to me, that is, to God, and from her promiscuity. Behold, meaning look, I will cast her into a sick bed. Now, this is Aramaic meaning to be cast into a sick bed means to be given an incurable illness. An incurable illness. That's what a sick bed means. And not only her, but those who commit adultery with her, that she parades off and takes them to the worshiping these idols. That don't be afraid of it. You can do it because we know it's nothing, but go ahead and have all this what you want with it. And therefore, they got into trouble. And they will be cast into, let me tell you, God does not cast anyone into a sick bed or give you an incurable disease. We do it. And what does he mean by a sick bed and incurable disease? It means venereal disease. And venereal disease was very, very, very hard to get rid of in those ancient days. Even today, it becomes pretty bad. Depends on what type of venereal disease you have. So that's why it says, by them continuing to do this, they will get a venereal disease and they're destroying their own body. That's why Paul in his letter writes about this. Paul in his letters in Corinthians talks about this, not in this about the book of the Revelation, but talks about those who have gone into such a thing. And he says about that they destroy their own body. Because of doing this, they get the disease and it destroys their body, but not their soul, but it destroys their body. And because of this stupid teaching that led them into these physical challenges, and problems. So this is what he's saying here when he talks about, but God doesn't do that. It was their own actions and the consequences of their own actions. But of course, in the Near East, everything is attributed to God. Now it's being attributed to the Spirit that's bringing this message to John on the Isle of Patmos. I hope you all understand that. God's not doing any of this. God doesn't remove light from an assembly. People do it by them following false ideas and notions. They remove their own light, and the messengers too, the ones who are in charge. So they get misled. They get misled. And I'm afraid that happens in a lot of churches today. If they were open to spiritual understanding, metaphysical, true, deep metaphysical, not the tiddlywinks that you hear in most metaphysical churches, of how to fatten your pocketbooks and how to do all these other things. They don't get to the root, to the soul, to the mind, to the heart. They're losing heart and soul. And so it is even in regular churches that teach the Bible. They don't teach the heart and soul of the Bible. They don't know how to teach the heart and soul of the Bible. All they know is doctrine and dogma, and they set it up. And unless you're doing it, you're on your way to hell. Jesus never taught those type of things. And you have to understand the language and how they talk, how Near Eastern people talk and how they represent this. God does not do any of this. Look what the 23rd verse says. And I will smite her children with death. That is, they will get the venereal disease and die. But I will smite. Do you know, if I was to read that to you in Aramaic, it doesn't say smite. You know what it says? It says, I will kill. That's exactly what it says. Ektol. That's how I would pronounce it in Aramaic. Ektol. Ektol. Because I'm putting it in a verbal form. I will kill. Dr. Lambs has softened it when he's used the word smite. I will smite her adherents. That word children didn't mean her literal children she had and gave birth to, because you see, teachers give birth to children. That is, to adherents, those who are following it. They become the sons. Literally, if I were to read that to you in Aramaic, I will smite her sons, is literally what it says. Literally in Aramaic, I will kill her sons with death. Meaning the adherents, those who adopted the teachings, those who accepted it, the members of her particular teaching of promiscuity and worshiping these idols and getting the venereal disease and dying with it. That's what it means. But God doesn't do that. It is the action of the people that bring it on themselves. God is merciful to us, and God is nothing but pure love, pure love. And this is why Jesus came. Remember what he says? When they were accusing him of all kinds of things, he says, I've come to save those who have gone astray, to bring them back, to give them life, so they don't have to do all this. Because remember, he was friendly with harlots, publicans, tax collectors, all those things which were hated. He ate with them, partied with them, went to their weddings, all kinds of things. He was not the type of teacher we think he was. You know, people always see this little halo around Jesus' head. Do you think they saw that when he was there? No, he was just a human being, just like everyone else, except he had tremendous, potent, spiritual healing power and truth out of his mouth. When he spoke, that two-edged sword came out of his mouth. But here in the book of the Revelation, it's using old language. Jesus didn't use this kind of language. Not at all. And when he talked about the judgment that would happen to certain cities, he knew the Romans were going to come in and destroy those cities. He didn't say, I am doing it. He said, I was wanting to save you from all that, so you don't fight the Romans, so you don't do this, so you can have a chance to live and survive it. But no, they didn't listen. So it came on. I'm talking about the story in the Gospels. But here, it's using the old language that the prophets used. And where God, everything is attributed to God and God's doing it all. No, God nor Jesus casts anyone into any sick bed or gives them any kind of disease. God does not do that. And when all these people, when that AIDS thing broke out, and all the Christian people were saying God's giving them AIDS because of it, no, God wasn't doing it. It was because they were very promiscuous, and then that came on them. God does not do that. God is pure love. You cannot say God is love and then goes ahead and gives you incurable diseases. Doesn't do that. It is our own consequence. You see, we won't face our responsibility. We won't do it. We'd rather blame it on the devil or God. God and blaming either one is a mistake. The devil wants you alive to be able to do things. I hope you don't take me too seriously on that one. But I want you to understand that God doesn't do it and the devil doesn't do it, because those of you who believe in the devil. It's your own thoughts, your own actions that bring the consequences on you. My actions, my consequences. What I do, therefore I suffer the consequences of it. God doesn't do it. God helps us in the midst of that. Instead of going to these people who had some of these incurable diseases and blessing them and helping them and understanding them and giving them love and showing the true Christ ministry to them, they brought hell and condemnation on them. It's disgusting. It's disgusting what we call Christianity to say. It isn't Christianity. It is not Christ-like at all. It is, I don't know what it is. Putrefied human thought and philosophy is what it is. And not true, loving, caring, healing Christianity. The one that is the true Christ. Yeshua Mashiach, the anointed one, to help bring people, restore people. Jesus was restoring people. He restored harlots. He restored people from their, brought them back to health and joy and understanding. And that's what we need to be preaching. And that's what this is talking about. Oh, I see my time is really catching up with me here. But I wanted to make this clear. I want to at least finish the second chapter. But I say to the rest, then he says, with death, that's what it means. God's not doing it, neither is Jesus. And he says, I am he who searches. Dr. Lambson translates this word as minds, which is okay. It can mean that, but it's really not the word minds there, M-I-N-D-S. I even have it circled in the English here. The minds and hearts. The word that is used there is the word yath, which means the essence, the being, which is, I think that's why Dr. Lambda used the term minds. He searches out the essence, what's really in the mind, again, what's really in the essence, which is in the being of the person, the heart and the being. We say heart and soul. In other words, he searches out the heart and soul. Again, I am not translating it literally, although the word heart is used there, which means minds. The word heart means minds. And so, because the mind is also in the heart, it's not just stuck up here. We always put everything up here. Mind is up here. No, mind is not. That's, mind is above you. And the brain is merely the felicitator for that mind. And so it is. And the heart, the neurons are in the heart too, and the neurons are in the intestines. So that's the essence, the core of your being. So what he's saying here is, I search out what? I search out the very core, the very beings and hearts. That's what I go for. That's what God looks at. And he says, I will give to every one of you according to your works. According to your works. In other words, if you're doing good, that the consequences of good will happen. But I say to you, the rest of you in Thyatira, those, it's really Thyatira, those who do not have this teaching, this from this woman, this false teaching, this doctrine, and those who have not known, as they say, the depths of Satan, calls it the depths of Satan, that I will not put upon you another burden. But look, I fast, but behold, hold fast to that which you already have till I come. In other words, till the great day happens. And he who conquers, or anyone who conquers, don't like he who, anyone who conquers and keeps my works until the very end, to him I will give authority over the nations. Now, this giving authority over the nations means you won't rule the nations. Authority here means you will not be fooled by the philosophies and teachings of any nation you're in. You will not be fooled by their government teachings, by none of that. You'll see through it. You have that authority to see through it. You have that authority over the nation, something that the nations don't have, the governments don't have. You have it. And what did he say? And he will shepherd them. He will guide them. A shepherd is guiding them. But the thing is, with a rod of iron, which means the shepherds use a little branch that they tap the heads of the little lambs and stuff so they didn't stray, and kept everyone in order. But a rod of iron meant strong discipline. Your rod and staff have comforted me. It means your discipline has comforted me because you saved me from a lot of things. That's what it means in the 23rd Psalm. So here, the rod of iron means a very, very strong discipline, because the nations are filled with all kinds of teachings and philosophies that bring bad consequences upon the nation. So you need a real strong discipline, strong teaching. That's why it's a sharp two-edged sword coming out of the mouth. Like the vessels of the potter that shall be shattered, even as I was disciplined by my Father. In other words, Jesus knew the strong discipline of God in his own life. And I will give him, now it eases up, the morning star. The morning star means the first sign of light, the dawn of truth, the first sign of light. So even though you're in the very center of all these troubles and problems and everything that you're in, you, by overcoming everything that is coming against you, what will happen? You don't run from those things, you overcome them. Not be afraid of them. You conquer them. They don't enter you. You don't suffer the consequences. And as a result, you have the bright and morning star, the first daylight, the first sign of daylight, the dawn of truth in your being and in your core. That's the meaning of it. Well, we've done almost through. We got to do chapter 3 before we actually get to the uncovering and the unveiling, which I really go into real strong metaphysical teaching in that 4th chapter. So we'll continue with this next Wednesday, but now I need your questions. All right, Hanny, do you have any questions there?
I don't, Rabbi.
Let me see if I have any. Whoops, I pressed the wrong thing. Because okay, let me try this right now. Now, just a thank you. No questions? I can't believe it. No one has any questions. It doesn't just have to be about what I said tonight. No questions?
Nothing coming my way.
Wow. That's unusual. Very unusual. Wait a minute.
Here, I got one. What were the foods that Jesus ate?
What were the what?
What did Jesus eat?
What kind? That's a good one. He ate everything that the people had. He ate meat. Oh, terrible. He probably ate lamb and rice, but they didn't have many vegetables. They basically had and the byproducts that they had from goat and sheep, and they did have some cattle. If only the wealthy really had the cattle, but the cows and stuff like that. But they basically had sheep and they had goat. I'm talking about in the ancient world, and so this is what they would basically eat, and that's what Jesus would eat, and that was his basic diet. And and they had dates, and they had certain type of nuts that they would eat, and they didn't have. You think they had really lots and lots of? No, they didn't. And they also made barley bread. They did make barley bread. They did have bread. The trouble with the word bread, when we translate it in the Bible so much, it doesn't mean just bread. Lachma in Aramaic, which we translate as bread, also means a meal, food. You can translate that word as food as well as plain bread, but they usually had barley bread. And they did use honey, but lots of times they would crush the date, of course, remove the pit and crush it and mix it, in the stone thing with the pestle, and rub it in the stone mortar there, and rub it and make it like a little paste, make it like a sweet. And they would have some fruit. Figs was their number one fruit there that they had in the ancient world, was figs. So that's probably basically his diet: some figs, some nuts, the almonds, but their famous one they loved was fig trees. Loved to plant a lot of fig trees, orchards of fig trees, and they had that. But not like the type of fruits that we have here, because we get it from all different countries too, the different fruits. But there in the Near East, that's what Jesus ate: some fruits, meat, flesh, and then also fish. So when I say flesh, I mean just the general, but not pork. Sorry, not pork. Jesus would not eat pork, but he would eat fish, and he would have lamb and goat, and as far as the meat was concerned, and then all these other ones that I just mentioned. Okay?
More questions?
Any more questions?
Yeah, another one came. Are you familiar with the Gnostic Gospels? And
With the what?
The Gnostic Gospels.
Yes, I am.
What is your opinion of them, and whether they are authentic teachings like the Gospel of Thomas, as an example?
Yeah, the Gospel of Thomas, that's from the Nag Hammadi, the whole series of different types. These were different ideas and approaches that came after Jesus and was not taught in the early assemblies. These came later, and some of it is metaphysical and some of it is not metaphysical. Some of it is they changed what Jesus said originally to make it fit their idea. Now, the word Gnostic is a Greek word, comes from Greek, and we've given it that title. They didn't go around, these people who wrote these books, and say, hey, this is a Gnostic book. Because it's the word meaning knowledge. It was supposed to be further knowledge. And a lot of things later on in the 2nd century and 3rd century, some of these books were titled as heretical. Now you have to understand the word heretical. Heretical means it didn't follow the original. And that's why they call it heretical. Today, the term heretical means, ooh, demonish, devilish, all kinds of things. And they called it heretical writings because it didn't follow, we would use the term orthodox, but they didn't use the term orthodox for those earlier followers. These was Jesus' teachings were simple. Jesus' metaphysics were simple. They weren't involved. They didn't, in other words, and they had teachings like the Kabbalah, and they had those type of teachings in Aramaic, but Jesus didn't use those things. He was not an Essene, although people try to make him an Essene. And the Essenes had certain dietary protocol. Jesus did not follow those types of protocols of eating. And he ate whatever the people put before him. And when he went to their homes and his disciples, when they fed his disciples, or what the food they brought to him, when he multiplied the fish and the bread, remember what happened is people brought more bread, people brought more of those things, and that's why it multiplied. He didn't pull it out of the air. They brought, and also people who had hidden bread shared it with the people. So Jesus did not follow any Essene protocol of eating at all, not at all. And you remember, you have to deal with what they were eating in those days, what was available. You think they had a grocery store? You think they had those things in those days? You think they could call Amazon and get all the food they want? No, no health food store, no grocery stores, no markets, nothing like that. They did have bazaars where they had fruits and figs and stuff like that. But then people, they grew them themselves and they shared with their neighbors. It was a different type of living in those days. No one teaches it from that perspective. We teach it from our perspective instead of the ancient Near Eastern perspective. No. So this is what they did. And the Gnostic, which means the further knowledge. And now there are new books, and I have them right here. I have the new Gnosticism. I have the new Gnostics, and not those old Gnostic writings, which is even better, much better. I like these, they're really good, much better than those older books that have been translated into English. And the name, even, these were a group of people called Gnostics. No, those are names that scholars gave these people because of the word knowledge and the Greek word gnosis, meaning knowledge. So it's not at all. We have such a funny idea of the ancient world because of reading these books that scholars have translated. But I have the new gnosis. I have it right there on my shelf, right over there. I'm pointing at it. The new gnosis that I taught years and years ago. And I like it because it's more modern and better to understand than even in the ancient ones. Okay. Any other questions?
There are a few, but you're already 4 minutes over.
I'm already 4 minutes. We'll save those and send them to me, and
I will.
Next week, in case they get frozen up next week if they don't ask questions.
Okay, you got it. You got it.
Okay. Well, everyone, thank you. I love being with you tonight. I know the Spirit of God is moving in your hearts and minds and blessing you and enlarging you and giving you health and joy. I love you. I bless you. And I'll see you next week. And I want to thank all those that are continually contributing to help keep us on this program, because, and when we don't charge, it's just on your own that you do that for us. And I appreciate it. Thank you. Bless you. And I'll see you next week.